Remember when you used to be the one giving advice? The person everyone turned to for help fixing things around the house, managing finances, or making important family decisions? But lately, it seems like the tables have turned, hasn't it? The children you raised now speak to you in that tone, you know the one, slightly louder than necessary, with words a bit too carefully enunciated, as if you've somehow forgotten how to comprehend basic English overnight. Are you sure you can handle that, Mom? Dad, why don't you let me take care of that for you? Sound familiar? Today we're tackling one of the most frustrating experiences many folks over 60 face. When family members start treating you like you're suddenly helpless, incapable, or, let's be honest, somewhat incompetent, simply because you've celebrated a few more birthdays. This subtle shift in how others perceive your capabilities can be infuriating, especially when you know your mind is sharp and your independence is precious. A neighbor recently shared how her daughter now insists on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, despite the fact that she's managed her own health care successfully for decades. She acts like I'll forget what the doctor says the moment I leave the office, she confided, the frustration evident in her voice. Another friend mentioned how his son-in-law now automatically takes tools out of his hands during family gatherings, assuming he can no longer handle basic repairs, despite having been a contractor for 30 years. These aren't isolated incidents. They represent a pervasive pattern that many people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond experience regularly. It's a peculiar phenomenon where the aging process seems to transform you in others' eyes, from a capable individual into someone who needs constant supervision and assistance, often long before such help is actually necessary. What makes this situation particularly difficult is that it typically comes from a place of love and concern. Your family isn't trying to diminish you, they genuinely believe they're being helpful. But good intentions don't make the experience any less demeaning or frustrating. When someone starts making decisions for you without consultation, takes over tasks you're perfectly capable of handling, or speaks about you as if you're not in the room during family gatherings, it chips away at your sense of agency and self-worth. The consequences of this well-intentioned but misguided behavior can be serious. Research has shown that when older adults lose autonomy and decision-making power, it can lead to depression, decreased cognitive function, and even accelerated physical decline. In other words, treating someone as helpless can actually make them more helpless over time, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that benefits no one. The good news? You don't have to accept this new dynamic. There are effective, dignified ways to reset these relationships and reclaim your autonomy without causing family conflict or hurting feelings. Over the next several minutes, we'll explore 6 powerful strategies that help you reassert your independence, while also acknowledging your family's genuine concern. These aren't about creating confrontation or distance, they're about establishing healthy boundaries that honor both your independence and your family connections. One thing to note before we dive in, everyone's situation is unique. Some may be dealing with adult children who've become a bit overprotective, while others might be navigating relationships with well-meaning but overbearing spouses or siblings. Some may indeed need assistance with certain tasks while remaining fully capable in other areas. The strategies we'll discuss can be adapted to fit your specific circumstances and relationships. The goal isn't to reject all help. It's to ensure that any assistance offered respects your dignity and supports genuine needs rather than assumed incompetence. After all, aging doesn't diminish your right to self-determination. If anything, the wisdom gained over decades should earn additional respect for your choices and decisions. A friend who recently turned 75 shared something profound after successfully renegotiating his relationship with his overly concerned daughter. Getting older, he said, is about adaptation, not surrender. That's the spirit we're embracing today, finding ways to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining control over your own life. So if you're tired of being spoken to like a child, having decisions made for you, or watching others take over tasks you can still manage perfectly well, stay with us. The 6 strategies we're about to explore have helped countless others in your position reclaim their independence and reshape family dynamics in positive, affirming ways. And the best part? These approaches focus on maintaining loving relationships while establishing necessary boundaries, because the goal isn't to push family away, but to create interactions based on mutual respect rather than assumed helplessness. Let's dive into the first 3 of our 6 strategies that can help you regain control when family members start treating you like you're helpless. Strategy number 1, open communication through "I feel" statements. This technique is powerful because it addresses the issue without triggering defensiveness. Rather than saying, "You're treating me like a child," which might make family members defensive, try something like, "I feel undermined when decisions about my health care are made without my input." This approach acknowledges your emotions without directly attacking others' intentions. A retired teacher named Robert shared how this transformed his relationship with his son, who had begun insisting on managing all his finances. "I finally sat him down and said, 'I feel sidelined when you take over my banking without asking. I appreciate your concern, but I've been balancing checkbooks since before you were born.'" That simple conversation led to a compromise where Robert maintained day-to-day control while welcoming his son's input on larger investment decisions, a win-win that preserved both his dignity and their relationship. The key is being specific about behaviors rather than making sweeping accusations. Instead of, "You always treat me like I'm incompetent," try, "When you take the garden shears out of my hands, I feel like you don't trust my abilities." This specificity makes it easier for family members to recognize and adjust particular behaviors without feeling completely criticized. Strategy number 2, demonstrate competence strategically. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. If family members are concerned about your ability to manage technology, for instance, surprise them by mastering a new app or digital skill. Nancy, a 72-year-old former office manager, described how her daughter was constantly trying to manage her online accounts. "She assumed I couldn't handle setting up my streaming services or online banking, so I took a computer course at the senior center and deliberately called her for tech advice less often. When I showed her how I'd organized all my passwords in a secure digital vault, her attitude changed completely." The strategic demonstration of competence works because it directly contradicts assumptions without confrontation. It's about showing rather than telling. If your family worries about your driving, perhaps suggest taking a senior driving refresher course and then invite them along for a drive afterward. If they're concerned about your home maintenance, tackle a visible project that showcases your abilities. This doesn't mean you need to prove yourself in areas where you genuinely would appreciate help. The goal isn't to reject all assistance, but to challenge unfounded assumptions about your capabilities. Another approach is to casually mention accomplishments or activities that demonstrate your ongoing competence. Martha, who recently turned 68, noticed her children becoming increasingly protective after her husband passed away. They started calling every day to check if I'd remembered to eat or take my medications, as if I'd suddenly lost all self-sufficiency along with my spouse. Rather than directly confronting their behavior, she began matter-of-factly mentioning her activities. "I joined the community board today," or "I figured out how to fix that leaky faucet that's been bothering me." These casual demonstrations of capability gradually changed her children's perception without creating conflict. Strategy 3, establish clear boundaries. Sometimes you need to be direct about where the line is between helpful support and unwelcome interference. This doesn't mean rejecting your family's concern, but rather channeling it in ways that respect your autonomy. Frank, a 76-year-old widower, found his daughter was showing up unannounced to check on him multiple times a week. I appreciated her concern, but it felt invasive and implied I couldn't manage on my own. He established a boundary by saying, "I love seeing you, but I need you to call before coming over. I'm still an adult with my own schedule and privacy needs." He suggested a regular weekly dinner instead, which gave them quality time together while respecting his independence. Setting boundaries works best when you offer alternatives that acknowledge the underlying concern. If your son insists on attending all your medical appointments, you might say, "I prefer to speak with my doctor privately, but I'm happy to discuss the results with you afterward." This honors your privacy while still including them in your health journey. Another approach is to differentiate areas where you welcome help from those where you don't. Eleanor, who uses a cane for mobility, told her well-meaning family, "I appreciate rides to farther destinations, but for neighborhood errands, I prefer to walk or take the bus on my own schedule." This nuanced approach helped her family understand that support shouldn't be all or nothing. Being consistent with your boundaries is crucial. If you tell your daughter you can manage your medications but then frequently make mistakes, it undermines your position. Choose your boundaries carefully. Focus on areas where you truly are confident and capable, while perhaps accepting help in more challenging areas. This balanced approach builds trust and makes it more likely your boundaries will be respected. Now let's explore our fourth strategy: enlist allies within your family. Sometimes having another family member who recognizes and supports your independence can make all the difference. This person can serve as a bridge, helping others understand your perspective and capabilities. Harold, an 82-year-old retired engineer, found himself increasingly sidelined during family discussions about holiday planning and travel arrangements. His grandson Thomas, however, noticed this pattern and began deliberately asking for Harold's input during family gatherings. "Grandpa, what do you think about going to the lake this year instead of the mountains?" This simple act of inclusion reminded everyone that Harold was still fully capable of contributing to decisions. The beauty of this approach is that it works from within the family system rather than positioning you against concerned relatives. Look for family members who naturally treat you with respect and approach them privately. You might say something like, "I've noticed that decisions are increasingly being made without my input. It would mean a lot if you could help include me in these conversations." Be specific about what you're experiencing and how they can help. Another example comes from Josephine, whose well-meaning daughter had begun taking over in the kitchen. During family gatherings, despite cooking having been Josephine's passion for decades, Josephine's sister noticed her growing frustration and started creating opportunities for her to showcase her culinary skills. "Lisa, did you know your mother just learned this amazing new recipe? Mom, why don't you show us how it's done?" This subtle reinforcement helped shift the dynamic without creating conflict. Strategy 5. Educate without criticizing. Sometimes family members' overprotectiveness stems from outdated information or misconceptions about aging. You can address this by sharing current research and information about active aging without making them feel attacked for their concerns. Walter, a 70-year-old who still enjoys daily 5-mile walks, found his children were increasingly worried about his physical activities. Rather than becoming defensive, he shared articles about how regular exercise benefits cognitive health and reduces fall risk in seniors. "I explained that stopping activity would actually increase my health risks, not reduce them," he recounted. Showing them the research helped them understand I wasn't being reckless. I was following best practices for healthy aging. This approach works particularly well with adult children who genuinely want what's best for you, but may be operating on assumptions rather than facts. Consider sharing information from reputable sources about active aging, independence, and the importance of autonomy for mental health in later years. When possible, involve healthcare providers in these conversations. Gloria asked her doctor to explain to her daughter during an appointment that she was perfectly capable of managing her medication regimen, despite occasionally forgetting where she put her reading glasses. Having a professional validate your capabilities can be enormously helpful in resetting family dynamics. And now, before we continue with our sixth and final strategy, I want to take a moment to connect with you directly. If you're finding this information helpful in navigating your own family relationships, please consider subscribing to this channel. By clicking that subscribe button, you'll join a community of viewers who value their independence and are actively working to maintain control of their lives while nurturing family relationships. Every week, we share practical strategies just like these that address the real challenges and opportunities that come with this stage of life. Your subscription helps this channel grow and reach more people who might benefit from this information. Plus, you'll never miss new videos offering insights on everything from health and finance to relationships and personal growth, tailored specifically for our generation. It's completely free, and it's a simple way to invest in your continued independence and quality of life. Now, let's continue with our sixth strategy. Create opportunities for role reversal. This approach is particularly effective because it subtly reminds family members of your capabilities by putting you in the position of helper rather than helped. The key is finding areas where you have expertise or abilities that benefit your family members. Richard, a 68-year-old former accountant, noticed his children increasingly trying to help with his finances. Rather than directly resisting, he offered to review his daughter's retirement planning strategy when she mentioned concerns about her 401k. Suddenly, I was back in the role of advisor rather than someone who needed advising, he explained. It shifted the dynamic in a natural way that reminded her of my expertise. Look for genuine ways you can be helpful that showcase your abilities. If your family worries about your cooking abilities, offer to teach a grandchild a special family recipe. If they're concerned about your memory, share stories about family history that only you remember. Barbara, age 73, found her son increasingly trying to manage her home maintenance issues. When he mentioned problems with his own garden, she offered plants from her thriving garden, along with specific care instructions. It reminded him that I'm still the gardening expert in the family, she laughed. Now he consults me instead of trying to take over my yard work. This strategy works because it naturally reestablishes mutual respect without confrontation. It demonstrates rather than argues, showing rather than telling family members that you remain capable and valuable. These role reversal opportunities don't need to be grand gestures. Even small moments can shift perceptions in meaningful ways. Let's continue exploring our sixth strategy in more depth because creating opportunities for role reversal can be particularly powerful in shifting family dynamics. These opportunities naturally highlight your wisdom, skills, and capabilities without confrontation. Evelyn, who recently turned 78, found her daughter increasingly hovering whenever she cooked, worried about safety in the kitchen. Rather than becoming frustrated, Evelyn invited her daughter to cook together, subtly taking the lead in teaching her a complex family recipe that had never been written down. As I walked her through the steps, explaining little tricks I'd learned over decades, I could see her perception shifting, Evelyn recalled. By the end of the afternoon, she was asking for my advice about cooking, not worrying if I should be cooking at all. This strategy works because it naturally reestablishes the traditional parent-child dynamic without requiring an uncomfortable conversation. Another effective approach is to offer assistance in areas where you genuinely excel. Carlos, a 72-year-old, retired English teacher, noticed his son attempting to manage his correspondence and important documents. When his grandson needed help with college application essays, Carlos offered his expertise. After spending an afternoon helping him strengthen his writing, my son stopped suggesting I needed help with my paperwork, he chuckled. It was a gentle reminder that I'd been handling complex documents since before he learned to read. Now, beyond our 6 core strategies, let's address some potential challenges you might face when implementing these approaches. First, what if your family members resist your attempts to reclaim independence? Sometimes, especially when patterns have been established for years, change can be met with confusion or pushback. Patience is crucial here. Remember that overprotective behavior usually comes from a place of genuine concern, not a desire to control. A gradual approach often works better than demanding immediate change. Dorothy, who had allowed her son to take over her financial decisions for several years, found resistance when she expressed interest in resuming control. He was genuinely worried, not controlling, she explained. We compromised by having joint access to accounts for 6 months while I demonstrated my capability. Once he saw I was making sound decisions, his anxiety decreased. Another common challenge involves managing differences between family members. Perhaps your daughter respects your autonomy while your son insists on treating you like you're fragile. Ruth encountered this exact situation and found success by addressing it directly. I thanked my daughter for her approach in front of my son, saying specifically what I appreciated about how she supported without overstepping. It created a model for him to follow without directly criticizing his behavior. What about situations involving genuine safety concerns? This requires honest self-assessment. Are there areas where you truly would benefit from assistance? Acknowledging these areas can actually strengthen your position when asserting independence in other domains. Howard, an 85-year-old with macular degeneration, accepted his family's help with driving while firmly maintaining control over his financial decisions. By acknowledging where I genuinely needed support, my insistence on independence in other areas carried more weight, he reflected. This balanced approach builds trust and credibility. Another sensitive but important consideration involves cognitive changes. If you're experiencing memory issues or other cognitive challenges, this doesn't mean surrendering all autonomy. Instead, it calls for more nuanced approaches to maintaining dignity and appropriate independence. Samuel, who was in early stages of cognitive decline, worked with his family to develop systems that supported his continued participation in decision-making. We created a checklist for financial tasks so I could manage day-to-day expenses with confidence, he shared. For complex decisions, we agreed I'd consult with my daughter, but the final choices would still be mine when possible. Technology can be particularly helpful here. Reminder apps, automatic bill payments, and other tools can support independence even when memory becomes less reliable. It's also worth considering whether cultural factors are influencing your family's behavior. In many cultures, taking care of elderly parents is seen as an obligation and sign of respect. If your family comes from such a tradition, acknowledging and honoring this perspective can help in negotiations about boundaries. Elena found her Mexican-American children were struggling with her fierce independence because in their cultural understanding, caring for aging parents was an expected duty. Once I recognized they felt they weren't fulfilling their obligations as good children, we could talk about ways they could honor that value without diminishing my autonomy, she explained. Finally, consider whether fear might be driving some of your family's behavior. Adult children often face their own anxieties about aging as they watch their parents grow older. Their overprotectiveness might partly be an attempt to control their own fears about your mortality and, by extension, their own. Theodore noticed his daughters became particularly controlling after a neighbor's father had a serious fall. I realized their behavior wasn't really about my capabilities. It was about their fear of losing me, he shared. Acknowledging that fear compassionately opened up a much more honest conversation about boundaries. As we bring everything together, let's look at how these strategies have transformed real relationships when implemented consistently over time. These aren't quick fixes, but rather approaches that gradually reshape family dynamics in healthier, more respectful directions. Consider the experience of Gerald, who at 74 found himself increasingly sidelined during family gatherings after a minor heart procedure. "It was as if having a stent placed somehow diminished my mental faculties," he recalled with a dry laugh. "Suddenly my children were making decisions about what I could eat, what activities were too strenuous, even what topics might be too stressful to discuss around me." Using a combination of strategies we've discussed, particularly clear communication about his feelings and educating his family about his actual medical situation, Gerald was able to reclaim his position within the family. The turning point came when I asked my cardiologist to explain my actual restrictions to my children, which were remarkably few. After that conversation, I made a point of demonstrating my capabilities without making a big show of it. Within a few months, the hovering had largely stopped. His story illustrates an important point. Patience and consistency are key. Changing established patterns takes time, but the investment pays tremendous dividends in quality of life and relationship satisfaction. Another inspiring transformation comes from Beatrice, who had allowed her daughter to gradually take over more and more of her daily decision-making after becoming widowed at 68. "I was grieving, and it was easier to let her handle things, but 3 years later, I realized I'd lost nearly all autonomy," she explained. Beatrice began by enlisting her more supportive son as an ally, then strategically demonstrating her ongoing competence by joining a community board and managing a neighborhood project. I also started offering help rather than just receiving it, particularly by babysitting my grandchildren and helping my daughter with her small business accounting, which had always been my strength. The shift wasn't immediate, but over several months, the relationship rebalanced. Now we have a much healthier dynamic where we help each other in different ways, rather than her just taking care of poor mom, Beatrice noted with evident satisfaction. What these success stories have in common is a thoughtful, measured approach rather than reactive confrontation. The goal isn't to reject family connections or legitimate help, but to ensure relationships remain based on mutual respect rather than assumed incompetence. Frank, a 77-year-old former business owner, summed it up beautifully. "I don't mind accepting help when I need it. What I mind is not being consulted about whether I need it." By implementing these strategies, you maintain precious family bonds while ensuring your voice remains central in decisions about your own life. This balance is vital not just for your emotional well-being, but for your cognitive and physical health as well. Research consistently shows that maintaining autonomy and decision-making power contributes significantly to better health outcomes and quality of life as we age. Dr. Eleanor Martinez, a gerontologist who's spent decades studying healthy aging, notes that the sense of control over one's life is a critical factor in cognitive health and emotional resilience in later years. In other words, by asserting your independence in appropriate ways, you're not just improving your relationships, you're actually supporting your own health and longevity. As we conclude, remember that the strategies we've discussed, using "I feel" statements, demonstrating competence strategically, establishing clear boundaries, enlisting allies, educating without criticizing, and creating opportunities for role reversal, are tools to be used flexibly based on your specific situation. Not every approach will work in every family, and you'll need to adapt these strategies to your particular relationships and circumstances. The most important thing is maintaining that delicate balance between accepting loving support and preserving essential independence. If you've found these strategies valuable, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel by clicking the subscribe button below. Your subscription ensures you'll receive notifications about future videos covering topics just like this one, practical, respectful approaches to the unique challenges and opportunities of this stage of life. We're building a community of wise, Experienced individuals who refuse to be sidelined or diminished, and your participation enriches that community immeasurably. Also, if you've successfully navigated situations where family members were treating you as helpless, please share your experiences in the comments below. Your wisdom could be exactly what another viewer needs to hear to transform their own family dynamics. What strategy do you think might work best in your situation? Which approach resonated most strongly with you? Sharing your thoughts not only helps others, but creates meaningful conversation around these important issues. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. It helps more people discover this content when they need it. And remember, reclaiming your independence isn't selfish, it's essential. As Barbara, an 82-year-old viewer, shared after implementing similar strategies, when I reasserted my autonomy, something unexpected happened. My family actually seemed to respect me more, and our relationships improved rather than suffered. That's because healthy relationships at any age are built on mutual respect, clear communication, and appropriate boundaries. You've spent decades developing wisdom, skills, and good judgment. Those qualities don't disappear with birthday candles, and the strategies we've discussed today help ensure others continue to recognize and respect the capable, independent person you remain. Thank you for spending this time with us today. Here's to relationships that honor both the love your family feels for you and the autonomy you've earned through a lifetime of experience.